In the quiet, snow-covered village of Sittaford, nestled in the English countryside, the snow was not just a gentle dusting. It had been falling thick and heavy for the past 4 days, blanketing everything in a thick layer of white. Captain Trevelyan, a retired Navy officer, had chosen this remote village for his retirement, where he purchased a plot of land and built 6 small bungalows, each on a 1/4 acre of land. The bungalows were rented out to various tenants: Mr. Garfield, Mr. Duke, Mr. Rycroft, and John Burnaby, an old friend and fellow Navy officer. Although Captain Trevelyan disliked women, an agency persuaded him to rent one of the bungalows to a foreign lady, Mrs. Willett, and her niece, Miss Violet, who had come from South Africa a month ago to spend their vacation in the quiet village. Captain Trevelyan had employed a servant, Evans, who had been with him for 5 years. However, Evans had recently married and moved to Exhampton, a town 6 miles away, where Captain Trevelyan had also rented a small house for himself. One evening, Mrs. Willett invited all the residents to her home for a tea party. After tea, they decided to play a game of table turning, a spirit game where the participants try to communicate with spirits through the movements of the table. 6 of them sat around the table, and soon a spirit named Ida began giving messages. At first, everyone made light of it, laughing at the supposed communications from the other side, but then something strange happened. The table seemed to shift in energy, and a new spirit appeared, spelling out the letters TREV. The group began to wonder if the message was meant for someone among them. When they asked, the spirit confirmed that the message was for Burnaby. The table then spelled out the words DEAD and MURDERED, causing shock and unease to ripple through the group. The time was exactly 5:20 p.m. Major Burnaby, disturbed by the message, declared that he was going to check on Captain Trevelyan. Despite the others urging him to stay because of the heavy snowfall, Burnaby set off on foot, determined to reach Exhampton. By 8 p.m., he arrived at the captain's house but received no response when he knocked or called. Growing increasingly worried, he went to the nearby police station for help. When the police arrived and broke into the house, they found Captain Trevelyan lying face down on the floor, his arms sprawled out, the room in disarray. There was a fracture at the base of his skull, and the window of his study was open, letting in the cold night air. The inspector in charge of the investigation called for Servant Evans, who usually left work at 2:30 p.m. but didn't return that evening as there was no pending work. Major Burnaby, as the executor and trustee of the captain's will, was asked to accompany the inspector to meet the lawyer. According to the will, Captain Trevelyan's wealth was to be divided between his 2 sisters, Jennifer Gardner, and the late Mary Pearson's 3 children, James, Sylvia, and Brian. Evans was to receive £100, and Burnaby was to inherit the captain's trophies and antiques. Major Burnaby was approached by Mr. Charles, a reporter from the Daily Wire newspaper. Charles mentioned that Burnaby had won a prize of £5,000 for answering competition questions and that he should have received a letter about it the previous day. However, due to the snow, many letters had been delayed or lost. Charles then slyly probed for details about the murder. The inspector then visited Jennifer Gardner's home, where he found her house neglected and unpainted, with only her maid present. When Jennifer returned, the inspector questioned her about her brother, but she revealed that they had seen very little of each other over the past 10 years. She had no idea who might have wanted him dead. Yesterday during this event, I went out for shopping, came back only by 6 p.m. The inspector next visited Sylvia, who had spoken to her uncle only twice since her marriage. She recounted how her husband had once asked Captain Trevelyan for money, which had angered him. Sylvia told the inspector that she had spent the previous afternoon with a friend while her husband was out for lunch with an American publisher. Finally, the inspector visited James Pearson, who was visibly upset. James explained that he had met his uncle at the 3 Crowns Inn around 4 p.m. and left around 5:15 p.m., checking out of the hotel at 6 p.m. Shortly after, news arrived that James had been arrested for his uncle's murder. Emily, James's fiancée, was determined to prove his innocence and find the real murderer. Emily and Mr. Charles, the reporter, decided to stay in Sittaford to investigate further. They first met Mr. Rycroft, who volunteered to help and shared what he knew about the residents of the cottages. He mentioned that Mrs. Willett claimed to be from South Africa, but he had seen luggage tags indicating they had been to Australia. Emily, growing increasingly suspicious of Mrs. Willett and Miss Violet, decided it was time to confront them directly. Her instincts told her that they were hiding something crucial. One night, Emily and Charles, the reporter, followed Miss Violet and discovered her meeting with Brian outside of Sittaford House. This was odd, considering Brian was supposed to be in Australia. The inspector questioned Brian about his unexpected presence in Sittaford, but Brian was evasive and reluctant to provide any details, which only deepened the mystery. Meanwhile, Mr. Duke, a peculiar and reclusive man, had been avoiding any discussion about the recent events. His strange behavior raised more red flags, making him another person of interest in the growing list of suspects. While Burnaby and Evans were at Captain Trevelyan's house collecting a few of his belongings. Evans noticed something unusual. A pair of boots was missing from the cupboard. This small detail piqued Emily's interest. She suspected that the missing boots might be a significant clue, potentially linked to the identity of the murderer. Determined to leave no stone unturned, Emily decided to conduct a thorough search of the house, hoping to find any evidence that could tie the missing boots to the suspect. Thanks for watching. So, who do you think is the murderer in the Sittaford mystery? What could be their motive for such a cunning crime? Share your thoughts in the comment box below. Stay tuned to our next video where we'll reveal the identity of the murderer and delve into the reason behind the crime. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out.